Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. And yes, we are back after a little hiatus. So if any of you were worried, I'm okay. A little bit under the weather, a little bit sick. But we are back. And we are talking about the Vancouver Canucks today. There has been a whirlwind of news out of Vancouver. And they are kind of looking like the early season tire fire, the dumpster fire here for the 2022-2023 NHL season. So we're going to start off with last season. You know, in order to get the context of what's going on right now in Vancouver, you might need a little bit of context to what happened last year. Now, if you guys look back, I want to say January, December of last year, about a year ago now, we were talking about how the Vancouver Canucks seem to have a divide in the locker room. And at the moment, they are in the process of firing head coach Travis Green, general manager Jim Benning, and a couple of the staff in terms of scouting and player development. There was a lot of wholesale change in Vancouver. And we were hearing some of the same issues we're hearing now. It was pretty much the same thing last season in Vancouver, and that's why they made some of those moves. Jim Benning made a couple of big bets, which made the new regime kind of with an anchor tied to their ankle as soon as they walked in, with contracts like Connor Garland, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and some of those kind of weird, wonky trades that the Vancouver Canucks had made. But now we're starting to see the new regime that has since come in starting to falter and make some of their own mistakes. And we're going to get to that today. So you look at the Vancouver Canucks last year, there was the divide in the locker room, and that was the big thing at the time when we saw the turnover in Vancouver. As some of those guys left, they brought in Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin to be the managers and kind of the GMs kind of building this thing back from the ground up, the architects. Quote from Islanders legend general manager Bill Torrey. So trying to become the next architects in Vancouver, right? New head coach, they bring in Bruce Boudreau. Bruce, there it is. Guys, that wasn't that long ago. It might seem like 5 or 10 years ago. That was this past spring we were singing that chant, Bruce, there it is. There was a divide in the locker room, which I keep bringing up. It was basically the veterans and the younger guys. And there was the idea out there that there was two different ideologies and two different mindsets in the season. And JT Miller was one of those more veteran guys and was kind of leading the front there. And Bo Horvat and Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser and some of the younger guys were kind of in their own group. And there was a lot of divide in the locker room. Bruce Boudreau comes in and the team starts winning. And they just missed out on the Stanley Cup playoffs. And how interesting would things have been if they did make the playoffs? Maybe they get bounced in the first round against a team like Colorado, but we never know, right? Because they never got in. But they came back from being one of the worst teams in the National Hockey League all the way to just missing the playoffs. So there was a lot of hope going into this year. There were a couple of things that needed to be fixed, specifically on the blue line, right? Because you look down the middle, they added JT Miller, who looked very good last year. You have really good centers like Bo Horvat and Elias Pettersson. Not to mention, you have some really solid wingers that maybe you want to see a little more from Connor Garland, but that was something we were expecting. Connor Garland, Vasily Podkolzin, Andrei Kuzmenko, one of the new additions this year, Ilya Mikheyev, Brock Besser. I mean, a really good group of wingers along with those centers. Not to mention, you have Quinn Hughes, who is the backbone of your blue line. And then in between the pipes, you have Thatcher Demko. So the idea is here that you've got your number one center in Pettersson, right? You got Petey. You got Hughes on the back end, your number one stalwart defenseman. And you've got your number one starting goaltender, which is Demko. So the expectation was, all right, well, we've got the three main pillars to this team, and let's see what we can do. Well, things have not gone so well. So it started in the preseason. They lost their first 5 preseason games. They dropped their first series against Calgary, both games, and the second one in Calgary, they lost 6-0, which was their ugliest preseason game this fall. They played a back-to-back with Seattle, lost both of those games, so now they're 0-4 to start the preseason. And then they lose to the Oilers in Edmonton. They start the season 0-5, and this is the preseason. And then they would win the last 2 preseason games at home against the Oilers and the Arizona Coyotes. Well, things didn't fare too well when they went back to Edmonton because they lost that one 5-3 with a blown lead in that game. Same thing when they start the East Coast road trip, which of course is the second game of the season. Exactly what the Canucks needed, right? 3-2 loss, another blown lead, and that one they were up 2-0 at one point. 3 unanswered goals by John Tortorella's corpse there in Philadelphia. They blew another lead, so 3 straight games to start the season. The Vancouver Canucks have blown multiple goal leads. They lose that one 6-4 down in the nation's capital. The Blue Jackets take care of business against these Canucks 4-3. The Minnesota Wild looked like the most vulnerable team. They struggled a little bit out of the gate. Yeah, they took care of the Canucks as well, winning that one 4-3 as well. So now you go home, and the context going into your home opener is you've played like shit at home during the preseason. To start the regular season, you haven't been very good. So their first home game, they're already 0-5 to start the season without a win. And then they lay a goose egg of a game against the Buffalo Sabres and lose their home opener 5-1 with jerseys already being thrown on the ice in Vancouver. They lose that game. They followed it up with a very, very disappointing loss. They lose another one. They lose 3-2. So they start this season, just to be on the record, 0-5-2, which is dead last in the Pacific Division, dead last in the Western Conference, dead last in the National Hockey League standings. So what has gone wrong for the Canucks? Well, multiple things have gone wrong. There's a lot of questions you could say about outside noise coming into the season, especially with your captain, Bo Horvat, on a pending contract that will end next summer. And we already talked about that just a few days ago, but you know, that's kind of a big storyline here. And not to mention JT Miller getting that massive extension in training camp that kind of shocked me and shocked a lot of the hockey world. It sounded like within 48 hours before that, there was no way that they would get anything done. And it looked like he was on his way out the door in a potential trade before the season. And then all of a sudden he is signed for an 8-year deal in Vancouver. Kind of crazy how things turn like that. So we're going to start off with Bo Horvat. And this, again, is a player that, mind you, was a part of that conversation last year with the divide in the locker room. And this is from Darren Drager. He says the Canucks would like to keep Bo Horvat, but also aren't going to rush into a contract. Well, the clock is ticking on that. And again, in Vancouver, you got to give more than that, because if not, there's going to be a ton of rumors throughout the entire season, and it's going to wear down Bo Horvat, and it's not really fair to him. It's really not fair to the team or his teammates or anybody else, and that's kind of where they're at right now. And the problem is, so they are in a rush to sign Bo Horvat, but they made sure to sign JT Miller before training camp. So that kind of shows your allegiance there. They put more emphasis on Miller than they do for Bo Horvat. Fair, considering the numbers last year, but the perception isn't that great when Bo Horvat is your captain, right? And then Bo Horvat has recently had some things to say on this losing streak, and he said, it's been a lot of years in the rebuild stage. At this point in the season, it just feels like it's never going to happen. Like we are never going to win again. And that's not really good to hear from your captain. And this is one of the things where I'm going to criticize Bo Horvat just a little bit. I understand the frustration. I understand where he's coming from. But this early in the season, to be saying stuff like that isn't really the best message. And again, when you're the leader, you're the rock, you're the anchor of your organization, you really don't want to be saying that stuff 6 or 7 games into the season. There's an 82-game schedule. There's still 75 games left for the Canucks to play. If they go 75-5-2, nobody cares about this 7-game losing skid, right? Obviously, I'm kind of hyperbole. They're not going to win 75 straight. A lot more things have to be questions if that happened, but you get what I'm saying. There's a lot of hockey to play. Now, here is the thing that I will say. They talk about you can't win seasons in October. That is fair. So the teams that are 7-0 right now, which I don't think there's any undefeated teams left, but you can't win the season going 7-0. But they do say you can't win seasons in October, but you can definitely lose seasons in October. Think of it this way. You think about how close they were to the playoffs last year. If they were on that pace for another week, they would have gotten to the playoffs over the Vegas Oh no, Vegas missed too. They would have made the playoffs over Nashville, I'm pretty sure. Nashville was that second wild card, right? So when you look at it in that sense, one more week, 2 or 3, maybe 4 more games, Vancouver would have been that playoff team. Now, again, things didn't work out that way. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. It is what it is. But that is something to consider if you're a Canucks fan. And when I look at the Canucks right now, that is something that, again, you can't win seasons in October, but you can definitely lose them. And I think that's kind of the anthem that the Canucks and their fan base should be trumpeting right now, because that is something that all you can kind of go off of now. That is all you can do. You can't, it's one of those things where you can't control the past. It happened. Move forward and find a way to win this next game, because tonight, which you guys will see this video before tonight's game, they play the Seattle Kraken in Seattle tonight at Climate Pledge Arena. Depending on when you watch this, this is a huge game. This is a geographical rival, a newer team. And at this point, with where you guys are in the standings, this is one where you're going to try and gain ground on those guys. Teams like Seattle and LA, San Jose, and Anaheim. All teams that are ahead of you that shouldn't be ahead of you, in all honesty, right? And, I had my picks that I thought Vancouver could make the playoffs this season. Not looking too great right now. Kind of making me look stupid, Canucks fans and the players. Come on, guys. We got to see more from these guys. Now, here's the next thing. And this is where my talk about the contract thing comes into play again, because this really fuels a conversation around the Canucks captain. So Bo Horvat was asked on the Canucks fans' frustration and a little bit of the dissatisfaction with the team's performance so far. And this was from Bo Horvat, in quote. He said, "My jersey got thrown on the ice last year, and I'll never forget that for as long as I play." And that is very concerning, because that is something that he took personally. And I'm not blaming him for taking it personally. I totally understand. Those are expensive jerseys, and that could be talked about in its own right. But Bo Horvat, you cannot deny, he probably saw that as a knock. Like, all right, now it's personal. It's one thing to be booing. It's another thing when you take the jersey that I wear, with the Canucks crest and my name on it with the C on it, and the jersey's laying on the cold, hard ice. That means something different. That is a different kind of symbolic. And I think that the ideology that fans will be with you through thick and thin, it's not really true. Canucks fans and every other fan base wants to see success in varying forms, but success. I think Canucks fans will be happy to have just a playoff product right now. Now, again, you want to win championships, of course, but they want to get somewhere near that, and they have not been there. It's been a real struggle for the Canucks, and I think the idea is the fans are upset with the lack of moves this offseason. They needed to add defense. They didn't do that. Quinn Hughes does not look very good. He ends up going down with an injury, probably because he was played too much. In his defense, he has probably been playing way too much, and that's concerning. You need more complementary pieces behind him. Not to mention the same thing for JT Miller, Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, all those guys. JT Miller has not been good to start the season, and we're going to get to him in a second. And he came out and said, JT Miller on the Canucks fans' reaction to the poor start. So I have two sides of this. He said, "I'm not worried about if people want to come to the game. Pay all that money and throw their shit on the ice. Go ahead. I've got a job to do." So I understand what he's coming from. But to disregard the fans' interest is kind of counterintuitive, because those same fans pay for your jerseys and your game pucks and your gloves and show up and cheer you on. You might not want to be saying that. Now, I understand what he's saying. He doesn't want to let the outside noise affect him, and I get that. But you have to, again, kind of like what Bo Horvat said earlier, we're never going to win, this is this and this, we're never going to win. I mean, come on, guys. It's 7 games into the season. And I think fans have the right to be frustrated, because it's one thing if you're the Arizona Coyotes and you're just not a very good team and there's not a good product on the ice. But they're selling those fans on two different things. A future, A, which you could laugh all you want, but they're selling future. And B, they're showing up to every game ready to play and giving it their all. And with this Canucks team, there is no sense from the fan base that they're not buying what you're selling them. They're spending $300 on a ticket, and you're not even playing your best. I think that's what's frustrating the Canucks and their fan base, and I'm all on board with that. And that's one of the things. Listen, you're in pro sports. Welcome to the world of pro sports, JT Miller. I think you've been around long enough. This is part of the game. I get it, but I think it's important for him. Drain out the noise, but don't talk about it. I don't think that's helping anything, and it's just creating more disturbance. And then Jim Rutherford was coming out talking about how, we're not going to hit the panic button yet. And Canucks fans are like, we've been hitting that panic button for 10 years now, since we made the finals in 2010, and nothing's happened since then. And I think that is why Canucks fans are so frustrated, is Jim Rutherford is taking this like, oh, we're not panicking. Yeah, you've been here for a year. Yeah, we've been here for the past decade, where the team has been in the exact same spot. How many more times do we have to hit the panic button before something actually gets done? I think that Canucks fans are rightfully so frustrated. And to be fair, the fans are frustrated as well. There's a lot of talk around, not a great fit with Connor Garland and Bruce Boudreau. There's also talk around the Garland contract. Nobody in Canucks management wants to own that contract, saying that they were the one that kind of signed off on that, and that's why they did it. So there's a lot of lack of accountability, lack of just overall chemistry and meshing between coach and player and management and fan base, and it's just a disaster. And that's why the Canucks are where they're at right now. And we already talked about that. And this was an interesting stat from Sportsnet. The Vancouver Canucks have been outscored for the Canucks to 15 in the third period this season, which is awful. And again, that's a lack of closing leads that they had, and a lack of just showing up in the third period overall. And again, maybe the lack of depth on the Canucks is a big part of that, especially in the Hurricanes game. And that's kind of where things are at for the Canucks. It's been a rough stretch for them, but I can account for teams that aren't good and they're giving their all, but they're losing. This isn't that in Vancouver. This is a team that has the skill. You look at the roster up front, at the very least, that can get it done. They're just not giving it their all. Sorry, but not sorry. And you know what? The defense, now that we've seen Quinn Hughes not there, there is nothing on that blue line. And that is something that, again, what do? You're going to be selling at the deadline because you're going to be trading Bo Horvat and maybe JT Miller before then. So if you can trade JT Miller at this point, what do? Right? It's a tough situation. I think it's something that we have to temper the expectations of what the Canucks will do moving forward, but they need to do something, because I hate to break it to you, the schedule gets more difficult. You look at this stretch, they have a couple games after the Seattle road trip, the Seattle game. From Halloween through the first week of November, they're at home. They play Pittsburgh, New Jersey, Anaheim, Nashville. They have 4 home games. Yeah, they have 4 home games. And then they go to the East Coast again, because they did so well on the East Coast last time. They're just so eager to go back. They have 2 critical back-to-backs in the Atlantic Division. Ottawa and Montreal back-to-back. Toronto and Boston back-to-back. And then the third game in 4 nights, they have to play the Buffalo Sabres November 15th before playing a couple of Pacific teams and Western Conference opponents until Thanksgiving. So the schedule kind of calms down just a little bit. But in that stretch in early November, it is going to be a gauntlet for the Vancouver Canucks. And depending on how they fare through that, we might see some interesting moves coming through in Vancouver. But let me know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think the Vancouver Canucks should do next? Is it a trade? Is it firing the coach? What do you do? Because I don't think it's Bruce Boudreau's fault necessarily, but I think he's going to end up taking the fall because of just the situation. Like, it's easier to fire a head coach and bring in a new one than it is to trade JT Miller and Bo Horvat and whoever else, right? So that's kind of what I think is going to end up happening. I don't wish it, because I like Boudreau as a head coach. I like everything that happened last year, but that honeymoon phase has died out pretty quick in Vancouver. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.